So James, I want to start because your beginning as a composer is fascinating. I saw that you self-taught yourself percussion and piano, and then at 17 you recorded at Abbey Road. So that feels like quite the leap. So can you talk a little bit about what led you to self-teaching yourself and then how you got to Abbey Road at 17?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to say right off the bat that I never wanted to be a film composer. It's something I kind of landed on coincidentally. I wanted to be behind the camera. I wanted to be a filmmaker. Um, Turns out you need a lot of friends to do that. Friends that are willing to act and be involved in whatever shenanigans I wanted them to get up to, which is easier said than done. And I had grown up in a musical family. My parents were great at exposing me to a lot of different kinds of music throughout my childhood. And so I think I found that film music was, somewhere that I could apply the joy that I had found in playing the piano as a child, in playing the drums, those very sort of natural instincts for me as a child, where those made sense. Um, and so I began writing music for my own films, and little by little, the opportunities started coming in. I was lucky that I was able to write a lot of music at a young age. I had the time and I had the support that I could really do that and hone my skills. And yeah, the very first film I did, they said we want to do this at Abbey Road, and that was a very lucky coincidence. Um, and that really, I think, laid the groundwork for my passion for recording with live musicians. Um, and writing music for picture, I think, is the perfect intersection of my love for music and film.
Yeah. And I saw that you did a lot during the pandemic when things were shut down. You did a lot of I forget the terminology for it, but like collecting sounds and like creating a library. Can you talk a little bit about why that was so important to you and like what that kind of where that desire came from?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we did two things. We did a score for National Geographic called The Real Right Stuff, and for that we recorded. It was classic COVID. Every musician at home with a microphone, and we, put those things together to create. I guess it was sort of a facsimile of an orchestra, but that was special in its own way, right? You're still getting that. Um, Personality from the players and actually, a lot more control
Mm.
to bring out the individuality in each player. So that was a fun experience sort of in its own way. Um, the other thing we did was growing up, I was lucky to go to the BBC proms at the Royal Albert Hall.
Mhm.
And I, it became clear that the Albert Hall was closed for most of 2020, and a lot of 2021, which was a tragic situation for them. But it presented this unique opportunity to get in there and record their organ, note by note. It's 9,999 pipes, which is just not really, the hall is not usually empty for a long enough period of time to go in there and record it in such detail. So, you know, yeah, the pandemic was definitely challenging, but I tried to make the most of it with opportunities like that don't come around so often.
Yeah, with that many pipes, I imagine that that was at least like a couple months of work, you know.
It takes a while.
So as somebody who grew up loving film and wanting to be a director behind the camera, I imagine you were quite familiar with Hans Zimmer's music before you have now been working with him for quite a few years. So can you talk about your working relationship and how it's developed through the years and how it has led to this project that we're talking about today?
Yeah, the first time I met Hans was 10 years ago, this
Mm.
year, actually, 10 years ago this year. And I remember he asked me, who are your influences? And 17-year-old me, I said, well, obviously you. And he was like, shut up. I can't believe you're saying that. Like, that's ridiculous. Do you want to try again? And I said, okay. So then I had a bigger think about it. Um, it turns out that Bach, Beethoven, Handel, I think those are a lot of the greats that I grew up being exposed to. and influence my music in maybe more subtle ways that aren't so I suppose, Hans has done so many incredible films that I've grown up watching and written so much incredible music that it's an obvious, an obvious inspiration. Um, but I think there's deeper inspirations that go back many, many years that just through exposure have sort of seeped into the cauldron of inspiration. Um, and so, yeah, 10 years ago I met Hans, and over those years, I did a lot of work with his company Bleeding Fingers Music. Chief of War was my last project on staff there, but we continue to have a very strong relationship. We always have done. And while I was there, we worked on a number of projects together. Frozen Planet 2 for the BBC with Sir David Attenborough. And also earlier this year, co-wrote the theme for the BBC crime drama Verdi, which
Hmm.
was a lot of fun. Um, and yeah, I've worked with him in a kind of hands-off way, pardon the pun, and more on a close level as well. And in I guess it was pretty towards the end of 2022. Um, Hans had been working on some music and had brought me in to help him, you know, orchestrate that and flesh it out and do some further arrangements. And we'd spent some time together in London recording that. And I think it was around that time that Russell, our score producer, called and said, Hans would really like you to do Chief of War with him. Um, and that, yeah, I think it all sort of led to that moment. I like to think, all those little bits and pieces that I got to do with Hans over the years led to doing what really has turned out to be. I guess I didn't know it at the time when I said yes to the project, but it's turned out to be really one of the most special projects of my career. So
So what I would imagine for Chief of War, there was an immense amount of research that had to go into it. Is that part of what has made this such a special project? Is like immersing yourself in the Hawaiian culture this way?
absolutely, absolutely. I think I was hit very early on by this feeling of imposter syndrome, firstly, because the incredible thing about Chief of War is that it's so Polynesian led. You've got Jason, who's Hawaiian himself, like starring in it, directing, producing. It's a celebration of Hawaiian culture, really. And so for Hans and I, as non-Hawaiians, there's definitely this feeling of like, why me? Um, and in those early stages, I'm doing my research. I'm trying to find information about traditional Hawaiian music. And the sad reality is there's not a whole lot out there. So the initial conversations we had with production, we were immediately on the same page of the Hawaiian collaborators are going to be the key to this score. They're going to be the heart of the music. There's no way that we can do it without those people. Thankfully, I think this had already crossed Jason's mind. And Kamaka'iva Kanakaole is, we'll talk more about her in a minute, I'm sure, but she was uh, as part of production as an advisor, and she was brought in to help on the music. And between her, I think the vocal groups that she put together for us, and the Poe and the Forefathers group, um, I really couldn't have asked for better collaborators. Not just in performing on the score and providing us with the incredible performances and the voices and the instrumental, prowess to record, but also, the access to ask the questions, to explore more about Hawaiian culture, because those people are the experts.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
I was very curious about the vocal aspect of it because it is such a striking component of the score. So how did that come into play? How was that your idea coming in? What were the words written by you? Like, can you talk a little bit about that kind of collaboration process in terms of the vocal side of the score?
Yeah, I think, traditional Hawaiian music is, it's very vocal.
Hmm.
It's vo a lot of it's vocals and percussion, really. As things were at that time, all the stories and everything has been passed down orally through generations. And I think song and art is such a huge part of that. Um, and, my primary collaborator on Chief of War, Kamaka Iva Kanaka Ole, her entire family really have dedicated their lives to preserving Hawaiian culture. Kamaka Iwa's great grandma, Edith Kanaka Ole, was, a seminal figure of the Hawaiian Renaissance. So that took a lot of the stress out of it to know that we had those collaborators. Um, and like I was saying earlier, Kamaka Iwa, she's such an incredible individual, such a funny, crazy person that it removes all those barriers of feeling like, is this rude to ask? Oh, I can ask any question and I know I'm going to get, the answer that I can really trust. Um, and there's no, I don't know, it's important that I feel comfortable, you know, asking questions that maybe if she wasn't so approachable, I would be a little bit more reserved in asking. Um, and I think that yielded actually a really authentic Hawaiian element to the music. Um, but about the vocals specifically, I mean, yeah, like I said, vocals are such a key part of Hawaiian culture, and there was a lot of thought about whether the vocals would be atmospheric in nature, which they are many times in the score, or whether they would be lyrical in nature. Um, and how much, how much at the forefront are they, right? Is it something that is behind dialogue and at the back of the score, or is it something that's right in your face? And that was something we had to work through scene by scene. Um, but Kamaka Eva, she wrote all the lyrics. She spent a lot of time at my studio in LA, and we were recording scratch vocals and coming up with lyrics that felt connected to the scene. I think that's the incredible thing as well. The Hawaiian speakers will immediately notice it, but for non-Hawaiian speakers, there's kind of an Easter egg there in that the vocals are just inherently tied to the scenes, right? It's um instead of just vowels or traditional cinematic, you know, washed out vocals. You've got lyrics that are inherently tied to what's happening on screen, and I think that brings a real emotion to the score that we wouldn't have otherwise had. And so through her solo performances, and she also put together the most incredible vocal groups that we recorded on Oahu. Um, my hope is that through the music we can amplify the Hawaiian culture that I found it so difficult to find online, and we can also present traditional Hawaiian music in a context that maybe hasn't necessarily been heard before.
I read that you had archival recordings that like kind of helped inspire you. Did that come from Kamakaiva?
A lot of it did, yeah. Um, and we had a lot of funny serendipitous moments as well. I had found some flute recordings on YouTube, um, and I had played them to our incredible flute player Kavai, and he listened to them and he immediately said, "Oh, that's my dad playing." So you know, yeah, it was quite surreal for him to be hearing his dad play and to be using that as a reference for his own performance and to continue the legacy of his family. Um, was a really fun thing. So yeah.
Wow. Um, as a percussionist, or you grew up playing percussion, what was this like a kid in the candy store moment because of Hawaiian's music has so much percussion built into it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's this guy in San Diego, Pacifica Percussion, and he built us some incredible Hawaiian pieces, including probably the most prominent percussion instrument on the score is the puniu.
Mhm.
It's a small drum that is strapped to the knee and used traditionally in hula performance. And so that was a huge part of the score. Some of it played by myself, some of it played by Kamaka Iva, and again, members of Poe and the Forefathers, Kiliona Young, Lopaka, all sort of came out guns blazing and really provided some incredible performances for the score.
Yeah. My last question is just the show spans over 30 years telling this story of Jason Momoa's character. So did you find the score changing in subtle ways to kind of mark this passage of time and maybe how the Hawaiian music has itself shifted over that 30-year span?
Yes, definitely. Um, yeah, yeah. Chief of War, I think the one of the main themes of the show is to do with uh learning from the past and moving forwards with sort of newfound wisdom, right?
Mhm.
There's a lot of that with Kayana and his journey outside of the islands and the knowledge that he brings back, and also the influence of the colonials on the islands. And so I think there's a clear evolution across the score, across the series as well,
Mhm.
where we begin with Hawaiian vocals. I mean, the main title opens with Hawaiian vocals. Um, and the deeper we get into the series, the more that soundscape opens up, right? We see the colonials and we go to Zamboanga and we have a completely different sound palette for that region. And then that seeps back into the score when we return to the islands. And by episode nine, it's like the gloves are off, and you've got electronics, you've got full orchestra, and then obviously all this Hawaiian instrumentation as well. Because by that point, it's like an ensemble cast have come together.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, James. I'm excited. I listened to the score, but I haven't seen the show yet, but I'm excited to watch it when it comes out tomorrow.
I'm excited for you to see it. We put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this, and it's such a huge moment for Hawaiian culture, really. I mean, that's what I'm most excited about. So many people have never heard the Hawaiian language. Even Hawaiian speakers have never seen, a show of this scale spoken in the Hawaiian language. I think to be able to do whatever I can, whatever my part is to amplify this moment for Hawaiian culture. I don't know how many times has you know has Olelo Hawaii been used in a main title.
Mhm.
Maybe this is the first time, so it's a huge honor for me to be involved. I'm excited for the world to see it.